on Cade Road is Senator Lynn Ruane. You have 4 minutes, Senator.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and thank you, Minister, for your time today. I wanted to raise the National Training Levy in the Seanad this morning because I think it is a crucially important source of revenue in the context of our ongoing national debate on the funding of third-level education. As the Minister will be aware, the Cassell's report released last year has painted a bleak picture of the state of our higher education sector. The report has made it clear that we must act decisively to save a third-level education sector which is in serious financial trouble. I firmly believe that the National Training Levy must play a central role in our response to this crisis. The report itself correctly identified employers as a major stakeholder and major beneficiaries from higher education. Our highly educated workforce is a major structural advantage for Irish businesses and enterprise, and it is logical that they would contribute towards its funding. I welcome the public consultation process currently underway in your department in relation to a proposal for an increase in the levy from 0.7% to 1% and strongly support such an increase. I note that the consultation process is specifically framed with the intention of responding to the Cassell's report and the challenges facing the higher education sector, which includes funding issues such as the poor comparative spend compared to other OECD states and the lower spend in comparison to the STEM skills gap and to the primary and secondary education, but also other issues such as STEM skills gap and the growing demographic of students expected to attend higher education within 27% increase expected by 2028. It is welcome that the Department is aware of and preparing for these issues. However, since the Government recognised that the National Training Levy will be a key part of our response to the third-level funding crisis, the need for us to understand the administration of the revenue generated by the levy since its introduction in 2000, how much has been allocated for expenditure, where the money has been spent, what money has not been spent and why, how such decisions are made and what the Government plan to do with the increased revenue is crucial. It is important for us to properly examine the record of the levy and the National Training Fund and ensure that it is fit to purpose and is being managed well and for the benefit of Irish citizens. I have a number of questions for the Minister. How will the additional income generated by an increased levy be distributed? I don't think any of us want a situation where Irish businesses are playing a direct role in higher education policy and decision-making and demanding that their skills gap be prioritised above other important factors. We need the arts and other such subjects to be supported just as much as STEM projects, so how will this be managed? Will the Minister consider investing the increased revenue in capital infrastructure in higher education institutions, as universities are not ready to respond to changing demographics or Brexit opportunities? Will the Minister give a commitment that this funding will come as an additional resource for the higher education sector and is not used as a replacement for the loss of any existing revenue streams? I also note in section 2.4 in the legislation, the Minister shall manage and control of the investment account of the fund. Can the Minister comment on what investment return the fund has achieved in the last 5 years and what is the investment strategy? Finally, can the Minister explain why there are unspent monies in this fund when the education sector is in the condition that it is? I look forward to engaging with you on this issue. I have also submitted a submission in more detail to the submission process and I look forward to your reply. Thank you.
Minister John Halligan to
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. First of all, can I thank you, Senator Ruane, for very important questions and also for agreeing to postpone this from last week for me. Can I just say, first of all, the National Training Fund, as you know, is resourced from the employees' levy of 0.7% of reckonable earnings in respect to employees in Class A and Class H, which represents approximately 75% of all insured employees. And, of course, the levy is collected through PAYE and PRSI system, and funds are transferred monthly to my department. Funding from the NTF is allocated by me with the consent of the Minister of Public Expenditure and Reform in accordance with the provisions of the National Training Fund Act. That Act is about Act 2000. And while the NTF does not form part of the vote, if you like, in my department, the allocation for each scheme is determined as part of the annual estimate expense process. The NTF is included as an annex, if you like, to the published estimates of the department, and such funding is included in the overall expenditure ceiling from my department since 2011. Prior to 2012, income from the NTF levy had fallen from about 413 million in 2008 to 299 million. However, since 2012, receipts from the NTF levy have increased annually due to the improved employment levels. So the NTF levy generated 299 million in 2012, 317 million in 2013, 338 million in 2014, 364 million in 2015 and 390 million in 2016. And it should be noted that the operation of the EU fiscal rules and the inclusion of the NTF in the Department of Education and Skills overall annual expenditure ceiling, that means that in the absence of an increased rate, if you like, of contributions, additional expenditure cannot be sourced then from the NTF without the corresponding drop in exchequer, if you like, expenditure. So the cumulative surplus in the fund has been critical, if you like, in maintaining expenditure levels, particularly in the provision of training for the unemployed. In the years when receipts fell below the expenditure levels required, it is considered prudent to continue to maintain an adequate surplus in the fund to meet demand, if you like, in the future years. And it should be noted that while the current surplus of 232 million represents a very significant sum, it would only cover 7 months of NTF expenditure at current levels. So the surplus remains available for investment in education and training programmes to meet the skills needs. And the NTF funding is used to raise the skills of those in employment, provide training for those who wish to acquire skills for the purpose of taking up employment, and provide information relating to existing or likely future requirements for skills in the economy. The majority of the funding is expended under the broad heading of training for employment and training in employment. That's training for employment and training in employment. Training for employment provides a range of training programmes for job seekers, including training for early school leavers, for people with disabilities, and targeted skills programmes such as, you would be well aware of, the Springboard ICT skills conversion. Training in employment funding supports the training of employed people, primarily in apprenticeships programme, an employer-led, if you like, contacted through the skills network model. And there has been a shift recently in the focus of investing with more funding allocated to training in employment and less allocated to training with job seekers. That is due to the upturn in the economy and the growing numbers of people in employment. So in 2017, I'm providing a fund of 366 million from the NTF as part of the allocation. And I've provided an additional 24 million in training those in employment to meet demand, which will arise mainly in the expansion of apprenticeships opportunities. And I'm also reviewing the allocation of funding in programmes in further education and training and higher education sectors as between the NTF and exchequer sources in terms of an appropriate emphasis on training for employment and training persons in employment, and of course of satisfying the needs of enterprise to meet strategic skills requirements. So I hope that answers as many questions as you have asked me. As you know, there's a consultation process, and you would be more than welcome to contribute to that, and would appreciate your contribution to it. If there's anything I've left out, absolutely, I will go back to the department if there's anything you feel that I haven't said to you or told you, and any further requirements or information you need, I'd be delighted to give to you.
A very frank response, Senator. Are you happy with it?
I do have one or two more questions which I'll send directly on to the department, because obviously you won't have access to them there. I just wanted to clarify, if I understood correctly, that you said that additional funds cannot be allocated unless there is a reduction in the Exchequer fund, so that it would be, is the increase going to be a replacement and not additional to the current?
Yeah, from what I can gather is that it balances with the Exchequer all of the time, and so whatever funding is spent on one, if you overspent or underspent, it requires you to deal with the Exchequer. But what I'll do is I'll find out. I've been on to the Department of Finance to ask me to give me a kind of a detailed analysis as to why exactly that is the case, and I most certainly will send that on to you.
Okay, and just one more. with the additional spend, because obviously a lot of the money in previous dates obviously has gone to fill in skills gap at that job seekers level, and third level funding hasn't received a whole lot in relation to the National Training Levy. And I'm just wondering, is the percentage of increase going to be directly for third level, so that actual increase? And if it is, because it does tie in with the Cassell's report, is it an idea that your own department wouldn't actually decide where that money is spent, and it would actually go to the core fund of the HEA, who would be aware of where the gaps are in third level?
I suppose I could answer that quite by saying to you that all of this is going to be part of the consultation process as to how best to allocate the money, whether it be higher education and so on. And we're hoping, and again, as I said to you, I would, and I do mean this, I would value, because I know you have a great interest in this, I would value your contribution into the consultation process as to how you feel it should be spent and so on. So, like, after the consultation process, this will come back to the House here and of course, to the Dáil. For discussion, and as I say, what I would urge you to do is let the consultation process go through, because I would have this almost the same view as yourself as to how the funding should be spent, and I do think that it's a balance of skills, apprenticeships, higher education and so on. So what I would ask you to do is wait for the consultation process, and I will immediately come back to you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Senator Ruane. Next